Alright, so we're looking today about how to utilise quotes when writing essays. It's a very important part of any essay. You know that the body part of a paragraph does ask for evidence, and quite often that evidence will be word for word or verbatim quotes. What is not known quite often is how to actually use those quotes in a grammatically correct way and in an effective way. There are some common errors that are made which I want to point out, and also how you might fix those up. But first of all, you'll see on your page that you've got this as well, that what you should aim to do, because one of the most common errors is that people just have a quote standing on its own. So it's a sentence by itself. One example of that might be this one here. So someone's used a quote from a short story, and these are all real examples from people's essays that I've collected over in the past. It's a sentence by itself, standing by itself. That is what you want to avoid. So what you should always be trying to do is to blend your quote into the point that you're making. Okay, so you make a point and the quote becomes a part of that point. So don't just drop it in on its own, weave it into the sentence. If you can't weave it into the sentence effectively, then what a shortcut or a trick is to use the colon mark, okay, that one there, where you can separate your comment, whatever your point is, and separate it from the quote. In effect, the quote is kind of just sitting on its own, but it's still grammatically, it's still part of that sentence. You just got your point separated by a colon and then using the quote. And also what you don't want to say is, this quote shows. In fact, a good practice is to avoid the word quote altogether. Rather, refer to what the quote actually is. What's the content of the quote? Is it a character's comment? Is it an action? Is it a simile? Some other things might be it's a statement or an assertion. It could be a character's action. So you would say when the character does, or when the character, and the quote might be a particular action that the character is performing, or when the character thinks, and followed by the quotation. So I don't just say this quote. We know it's a quote because it's in inverted commas. We don't need you to tell us this quote. Alright, so these examples that I've got here, 1 to 9, they've all got some kind of error based on those two things, that it's not woven into the sentence, or it might refer to the quote. I'm going to do a couple with you and then see if you can identify some of the other errors and how to fix it. There might be one or two that are actually presented correctly. But first of all, if you look at that first one from a short story by Tim Winton, A Blow a Kiss it's called, it says Albie's father gets into 2 fights in a blow a kiss, which can be considered masculine behaviour, yet he loves his son more than anything. So there's the point, followed by the quote. He reached out and put his knuckles to Albie's cheek, left them there a long time as though still waiting for the words to come. Although unusual, this quote tells the reader how much Albie's father loved him. Now, first of all, an easy thing to get rid of is the word quote. What was the quote what was the content of the quote was an action or a behaviour of the father, where he put his knuckles to Albie's cheek and he left them there a long time. So we don't need to say this quote, we can say this action. This action tells the reader how much Albie's father loved him. Okay, so you're just identifying what the content of the quote is. And also, while we're here, we don't need this gap. It should all be part of the same paragraph, so no gap there. Question?
When it said he reached out, put his knuckles on Albie's cheek, is that mean question?
No, just put his knuckles gently to his cheek, like, affectionate way. Yet he loves his son more than anything. So now we want to introduce this quote. Now, what you're aiming to do here is to contextualise the quote, like who is the quote coming from. So we might introduce it in this way. First of all, the point is Albie's father gets into 2 fights which can be considered masculine behaviour, yet he loves his son more than anything. This is revealed, for instance, when and I can just put the quote in here, when he reached out and put his knuckles to Albie's cheek. So notice that the quote, this action is meant to reveal how much the father loves the son, and it's revealed through this action. So this is revealed when he reached out and put his knuckles. So with a simple little phrase, it becomes part of your point rather than just standing alone. So that just fixes up. And just notice here as well, I've put a comma to separate your... Grammatically, we don't need that comma, but we're just separating your point from the quote there. So that's another convention here. The next one, boys can be assumed to be adventurous, fun and mean, yet Albie is very different to this. But he did not run. He bent down and kissed the wet, prickled face. This was talking about a motorcycle rider that had come off his bike and was lying injured, and Albie, being a small boy, rather than run away from... And the motorcyclist was quite violent because he was agitated. He bent down and kissed the wet, prickled face. Again, the quote is on its own, in a sentence by itself, which we want to avoid. And again, it's got the word, this quote can be interpreted as a bit unusual for a boy of this Albie's age. Again, what's the content of the quote? It's a particular behaviour, it's an action. So we can just change the word quote with this behaviour. This behaviour can be interpreted as a bit unusual for a boy of Albie's age. So a very simple fix there, but we need to fix up that sentence on its own. So yet Albie is very different to this. I might say here, a little bit different to the first one, because now I had to contextualise that quote for you. I had to tell you the fact that it was a motorcyclist that had crashed and he was agitated, he was injured, he was a bit violent. You want to do that kind of thing within your paragraph as well. Otherwise, you don't know what the context of this boy not running and kissing someone's face. So this is when... This is because when, let's say, faced with a agitated, injured motorcycle rider, I'll get rid of the but, because the but doesn't work with my sentence. When faced with an agitated, injured motorcycle rider, he did not run, he bent down and kissed the wet, prickled face. Okay, so that short phrase contextualised where the quote came from and also made it as part of my point. Number 3 is actually correct. We are led to believe Mickey is an outsider when the boys ignored him like they usually do. There's one other part of a quoting that I want to point out, and I'll show you that with number 5. You notice that I'm going to get rid of this. This is the way the student wrote it, which is why I've left it in here. But quite often, in order for your quote to work in your sentence, you may have to replace a word or two from the quote with your own words. You're probably familiar with the use of ellipses, the 3 dots, in order... Sometimes you might remove part of the quote. That's less relevant, in which case if you remove part, you'll put the ellipses in there so that you're telling the reader there's a gap, you've missed a bit out. Sometimes you need to replace a bit of a quote with your own words. So in the case here, the original quote from the book was like this. He is considered the ringleader of the boys, which we find out when he moved across to where he was standing and the rest of the boys followed. Now, the ringleader here is... Let me see if I can remember. When we find out when he moved across to where he was standing... Now, we don't know who the he is. There's lots of he's in here. He's considered the ringleader boys when he moved across to where he was standing and the rest of the boys followed. Now, some people might go when he bracket Mickey was standing, where he bracket Mickey was standing and the rest of the boys followed. That is not wrong necessarily, but what is better is when you actually replace the word with your own word, So if I want to replace the word he, I put it in square brackets. Square brackets communicates to the reader that that's your word and not a word from the original text. It doesn't have to be a name, it can be any word that makes it work with your sentence. So your options are, you can either remove words and put ellipses in, or you can replace words and put your word in with a bracket. Okay, so what I want you to do is to go through the rest of those examples, see if you can pick up how you can fix it, and you'll notice there's a task at the bottom. I've given you a quote from Northern Lights where the librarian mentions, talks about Lyra and says, I know her only too well, try to tell her anything serious and she'll half listen for 5 minutes and then start fidgeting. Don't use the word quote. This is an observation of the librarian, or it's an assertion, it's a comment, it's a claim. Think about what it is that you're using here and try and put that into a specific point about Lyra. Okay, so you don't really need to write the whole paragraph, you're just writing one sentence that makes a point about her character and see if you can weave this quote in to support it. So I'm going to pause this for a little while so that you can do that. Okay, now number 6 here is, this is what I see very often. This is what I see very often where people make a point here. So, however, Mrs. Timothy's impressions of the man are quite different. She assumes he is a criminal. I hear the news, I've heard about boys like you, I know all about them. This kind of thing happens all the time, where people make a comment, which is good. She assumes he's a criminal, but kind of just the quote follows straight on without any link or connection with the point there. So one way to fix that could be to change some words or to introduce it in some way. So she assumes he is a criminal. Sorry? You could do, which is supported by when she says, comma, and you can do that. Or a more sophisticated way to do it, and that way is just fine. Another way to do it is she assumes he is a criminal when, because, and here is where I can use the square brackets, because I can put in square brackets, where am I, square bracket there, she hears, and again square brackets. This is another way you can use square brackets. So you put in square brackets to change the word. She hears the news and again she heard about boys like, and again like you is what she would say. I would change it to him. I know all about them. Okay, so by changing some words, you make it part of your point. She assumes he is a criminal because she hears the news and she heard about boys like him.
She knew all about them.
And she... Oh yes, good, thank you. And she knew all about them.
My way would be so much easier.
In some ways it's easier, in some ways just putting that in... But I guess the thing is, if you always do it that way, it might sound a little bit repetitive. Now, I'm just going to show you my effort here with the Northern Lights quote. And just the bit on the bottom is the original quote. Okay, that's what it came from the book, and I just want to show you how I've incorporated it into my point there. Early in Northern Lights, it is made clear that Lyra, in her childish innocence, is not interested in the formal education valued by the masters at Jordan College. So this might be going into a paragraph about her growing up, starting off childlike and innocent in the beginning of the book. This is made clear by the librarian, who doubts Lyra's ability to take on the responsibility she has been prophesied to take, and observes to the master that when he tries to tell her anything serious, she'll half listen for 5 minutes and then start fidgeting. So you notice there that in order for that to work, I had to change the TRY into tries so it would work, and I had to get rid of the and. I had to get rid of the and, so that ellipses is only showing a missing and. Okay, that's the only difference there. If I didn't do it, it wouldn't work. When if I left it as it was, it would say, when he observes to the master that when he tried to tell anything serious, and she'll half listen for 5 minutes and then start fidgeting. It wouldn't work as part of the sentence, so I just had to fidget the quote. And notice I've identified it as an observation. He observes to the master. And I haven't had to use the word quote at all. Okay, so there are some tips and tricks and conventions that you would want to apply with it. Oh, by the way, I mentioned before that if you can't make it part of the sentence, you can apply the colon technique, where you might know. Let's see if I can find an example of that now. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the reader is informed. If I look at number 10, the reader is informed by this change of setting through the darkened description. Rather than a full stop, I just whack in a colon, and that makes it acceptable. It's not great, but it's acceptable. So you've still got effectively two separate sentences, but they've just been joined together by the colon. So that's how you might use the colon.